He brought strangers into her living room to sell the house, but he forgot one thing. The walls had been keeping her secret longer than he had been keeping his pride. Claire Bennett stood halfway down the staircase with one hand on the polished banister, watching her husband smile at the realtor as if the house beneath their feet had already stopped being a home. The front door was open behind them, letting in a sharp October wind that carried the smell of wet leaves across the hardwood floor. A couple in expensive coats moved slowly through the living room, whispering about square footage, natural light, and resale value. Vanessa Cole stood near the fireplace in a cream blazer, holding a leather folder against her chest, her red nails tapping softly as if she were counting down to Claire's defeat. Ethan Bennett did not even look embarrassed. He stood in the center of the room in his navy suit, confident, polished, almost cheerful, like a man showing off a prize he had already won. The house has great bones, he told the buyers. Original oak floors, updated roof, half an acre in a quiet neighborhood, 20 minutes from downtown. Claire felt each word land like a hand removing pieces of her life from the room. Great bones. Updated roof. Half an acre. He did not mention her mother's rose bushes by the porch. He did not mention the pencil marks on the kitchen doorway where Claire's height had been measured every birthday until she turned 16. He did not mention the little burn mark on the dining table from the first Thanksgiving Claire had hosted after her mother died. To him, those were not memories. They were clutter between him and a bigger future. Ethan, she said from the stairs, her voice calm enough to surprise even herself. We did not agree to show the house today. The room went still. The realtor lowered his tablet. The buyers glanced at each other. Vanessa's smile tightened, but Ethan only turned with that patient expression he used when he wanted people to think Claire was being difficult. We talked about this, he said. No, Claire answered. You talked. I listened. There is a difference. For 1 second something flashed in his eyes. Not guilt. Annoyance. Then he gave a small laugh and looked back at the buyers as if apologizing for a minor inconvenience. My wife is sentimental. This house has been in her family a long time. But we both know it is time to move forward. Claire came down the last few steps slowly. In her right hand, hidden against her palm, was an old brass key worn smooth from years of use. Her mother had given it to her the summer before she passed, pressing it into Claire's hand at the kitchen table with a strange softness in her voice. Keep this, sweetheart. One day you may need to remember what a house is really for. At the time, Claire thought her mother meant comfort. Now she was not so sure. Ethan walked to the coffee table and picked up a stack of papers. The sales agreement had already been printed. Little yellow tabs marked every place he expected Claire to sign. He held out a pen. Let us not make this dramatic. Just sign and we can start over somewhere better. Somewhere better, Claire repeated. Her eyes moved past him to the fireplace, where her mother's old clock ticked quietly on the mantel. Better for who? Ethan stepped closer, lowering his voice. For us. For our future. For once, stop acting like keeping this place is some kind of moral victory. It is a house, Claire. Wood, brick, taxes, and repairs. Vanessa added softly, it is also a very smart market window. Ethan shot her a grateful glance, and that glance hurt Claire more than the papers in his hand. There had been a time when Ethan would have defended this house because it mattered to her. There had been a time when he fixed the porch light in the rain, made pancakes in the kitchen, and told Claire he felt lucky to be loved inside these walls. But years of failed deals, unpaid credit cards, and watching richer men pass him by had hollowed something out of him. Now he saw every room as money trapped in drywall. Claire looked at the pen, then at her husband. This house is not yours to sell. Ethan's smile disappeared. Excuse me? She lifted her chin. I said this house is not yours to sell. A sharp silence followed. The buyers stopped pretending not to listen. The realtor shifted his weight. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. Ethan laughed once, cold and disbelieving. Claire, do not embarrass yourself. We are married. I have paid bills here. I have repaired things here. This house is mine as much as yours, maybe more, considering who has been carrying the financial weight lately. Claire's fingers tightened around the old brass key. Before she could answer, the doorbell rang. Everyone turned. A gray-haired man in a dark overcoat stood on the porch, rain shining on his shoulders, a sealed envelope in one hand and a leather briefcase in the other. Claire knew him immediately. Samuel Price, her mother's attorney, stepped inside with quiet authority. His eyes moved from the buyers to Vanessa to Ethan and finally to Claire. "Mrs. Bennett," he said gently, "I am sorry to interrupt, but before anyone signs anything, your wife deserves to hear what her mother left behind." Samuel Price's words did not explode through the room. They settled there, quiet and heavy, like dust caught in a beam of light. Ethan stared at him, the pen still in his hand, his confidence cracking just enough for Claire to see it. Vanessa shifted near the fireplace, her polished smile frozen in place. The realtor cleared his throat and muttered that perhaps the buyers could step outside for a moment. Ethan did not answer, so the couple in expensive coats moved toward the porch, whispering apologies as if they had walked into the wrong kind of open house. Claire remained beside the coffee table, the old brass key pressed into her palm, feeling the cold teeth of it against her skin. "Mr. Price," Ethan said at last, forcing a laugh that sounded too thin, "this is not a good time." Samuel looked at the sales agreement on the table, then at Ethan. "It appears to be exactly the right time." Claire's breath caught, but before Samuel could open the envelope, her eyes drifted through the living room and the present loosened its grip. She saw the house as it had been before Ethan started measuring it in dollars. She saw herself at 5:30 that morning, hours before the realtor arrived, standing in the kitchen in her bakery apron, kneading dough while the sky outside was still dark blue. The old oven hummed. The coffee maker sputtered. The house was quiet except for the soft tick of her mother's clock from the living room. Claire had always loved that hour, before the world asked anything from her. She would set out flour, cinnamon, butter, and sugar, then open her mother's recipe box, the one with faded cards written in Margaret Whitmore's careful handwriting. Blueberry muffins, Sunday biscuits, apple walnut bread. Each card was stained at the edges, marked by years of breakfasts, birthdays, grief, and ordinary love. After the first trays went into the oven, Claire would drive 3 miles to her small bakery on Maple Street, unlock the front door, turn on the lights, and breathe in the warm smell of yeast and vanilla. Bennett Bakes was not fancy. It had 6 little tables, a chalkboard menu, and a bell above the door that chimed every time a customer came in. But it was honest. Nurses came after night shifts. Teachers bought coffee before school. Older neighbors stopped by for oatmeal cookies and stories they had already told twice. Claire knew who liked extra cream, who was saving for college, who had lost a spouse, who needed someone to say good morning like it mattered. By noon her feet ached. By 3 she was wiping counters, counting cash, and checking which bills could wait until Friday. She was not rich. She never pretended to be. But every dollar she earned had the shape of work inside it. Every loaf she sold helped keep the lights on, the taxes paid, the garden trimmed, and the old house breathing. Ethan used to understand that. In the beginning, he would stop by the bakery after showings, loosen his tie, and steal the broken cookies she could not sell. He would kiss her forehead in front of Mrs. Alvarez from the post office and say, "My wife makes the whole town smell like home." Back then, he looked at the house with gratitude. He painted the back fence without being asked. He carried groceries for Margaret when her knees hurt. He sat beside Claire on the porch in July, drinking lemonade from mason jars, talking about someday filling the spare room with books, music, and laughter. Then the real estate market changed. His first investment failed. Then another. Then the bigger men with better suits and louder confidence started passing him at work. Ethan began coming home later, quieter, sharper. He stopped saying home and started saying equity. He stopped seeing the rose bushes and started seeing land value. He stopped touching the banister with affection and started complaining about maintenance. Claire tried to be patient because she remembered the man before the bitterness. She paid small bills without telling him. She picked up extra catering orders. She let his pride have space, even when that space pushed her into corners. But the house remembered everything. It remembered Margaret standing in the kitchen, weak but smiling, pressing the old brass key into Claire's hand. It remembered Claire crying into a dish towel after the funeral, while Ethan held her like he would never let go. It remembered every apology he never finished and every dinner she kept warm until it went cold. Now, standing in the living room while Samuel Price held her mother's sealed envelope, Claire finally understood why her mother had looked so serious that summer afternoon. The key was not just for a door. It was for a day like this. Ethan placed the pin down slowly. Claire, he said, trying to soften his voice in front of Samuel. We can discuss whatever this is later. Claire looked at him, then at the papers with yellow tabs waiting for her signature. No, she said quietly. We discuss it now. Ethan had not always been the kind of man who spoke about a home like it was a trapped bank account. There had been a time when he walked through that same front door with rain in his hair and flowers from the grocery store because he could not afford roses from a florist. Claire remembered him at 28, laughing in her mother's kitchen while Margaret taught him how to roll biscuit dough without crushing it. He had been clumsy then, humble enough to laugh at himself, gentle enough to carry Margaret's heavy laundry basket without making a show of it. He had loved the house because Claire loved it. Or maybe Claire thought now, he had loved how the house made him feel when life was still simple enough to call love a plan. But failure had a way of changing the sound of a man's footsteps. The first deal that collapsed was a small condo flip on the edge of town. Ethan said it was bad timing. The second was a partnership with a contractor who vanished halfway through renovations. Ethan said it was bad luck. The third was a luxury listing he bragged about for weeks, only to lose it to a younger agent with better connections and a louder car. After that, he stopped calling things bad luck. He started calling them humiliation. Claire watched the change happen slowly, then all at once. He traded his soft sweaters for sharper suits. He started reading investor newsletters at dinner. He stayed late at networking events and came home smelling of expensive cologne, cold air, and someone else's ambition. That someone was Vanessa Cole. She worked in commercial real estate, knew how to praise a man exactly where he felt weakest, and spoke about money as if it were the only language adults should respect. Claire met her at a holiday mixer, where Vanessa looked around the bakery table Claire had prepared and said, "How charming. You still do everything by hand." Ethan had laughed too quickly, as if the word charming did not sting. After that, Vanessa's name appeared more often. Vanessa knew a lender. Vanessa had a buyer. Vanessa understood how people with vision moved. Then came the phrase that changed the house. Dead money. Ethan repeated it one night in the kitchen while Claire packed leftover muffins for a shelter fundraiser. This place is dead money, he said, tapping the counter with 2 fingers. Do you know what the land alone could do for us if we stopped being emotional about it? Claire looked at him over the open bakery box. Us? Ethan did not hear the question inside the word. He was already pacing, describing a luxury condo project Vanessa had brought him into. A chance to buy early, sell high, and finally stand in rooms where no one treated him like an underachiever. He spoke faster as he dreamed aloud. New car. Better address. Bigger clients. A life that proved he had not failed. Claire tried to follow him into that dream, but she could not find herself anywhere in it. Where would we live? She asked. He waved a hand. Somewhere modern. Easier to maintain. Something without all this emotional clutter. Emotional clutter. The words had stayed with her for months. They followed her when she dusted Margaret's clock, when she watered the roses, when she ran her hand across the kitchen doorway where childhood pencil marks still climbed the painted wood. Ethan did not know those marks were not just Claire's. The lowest one belonged to Margaret herself, measured by Claire's grandfather in 1968, back when the house had first become a family promise. To Ethan, it was an old frame in a desirable neighborhood. To Claire, it was 3 generations saying, "You belong here." Now, in the living room, Samuel Price stood between that promise and Ethan's ambition. Vanessa watched the sealed envelope like it was an insult wearing paper. Ethan straightened his shoulders, trying to reclaim the room. "Fine," he said. "Let us hear it. But this does not change the fact that I have invested years into this marriage and this property." Samuel did not raise his voice. Years do not create ownership where the law does not. Ethan's face tightened. Claire felt the room tilt toward something final, but she did not feel victorious. She felt tired. Tired of defending memory from greed. Tired of translating love to a man who only trusted numbers. Samuel placed the envelope on the coffee table beside the unsigned sales agreement. The old brass key warmed in Claire's palm as if her mother's hand still covered hers. Ethan looked at the key for the first time, really looked, and a shadow of uncertainty crossed his face. "What is that?" he asked. Claire opened her fingers. The key lay there, dull and golden, small enough to ignore until the exact moment it mattered. "Something my mother gave me," she said. Ethan swallowed. Vanessa crossed her arms. The clock on the mantel ticked once, twice, 3 times. And for the first time all day, nobody in the room moved. The old brass key in Claire's palm pulled her back to the last summer her mother was alive. Margaret Whitmore had still been strong enough to sit at the kitchen table in the morning light, a blue cardigan around her shoulders, a cup of tea cooling beside her untouched. Claire remembered the way dust drifted through the window above the sink, the way the house sounded peaceful even when sadness was already walking through it. Margaret had asked her to come early, before the bakery opened, before Ethan woke, before anyone could interrupt. On the table sat 2 things, the brass key and a sealed cream envelope with Claire's name written across the front in Margaret's careful handwriting. Samuel Price sat across from them that morning, younger than he looked now but just as composed, his leather briefcase resting near his chair. Claire had tried to smile. "Mom, why does this feel like a legal drama?" Margaret reached for her hand. "Because sometimes love has to be written down before the world tries to argue with it." Claire had not understood. Not fully. She only knew her mother looked tired in a way sleep would not fix. Samuel explained gently that Margaret had updated important documents, not because she expected trouble, but because she had lived long enough to know that grief, money, and marriage could reveal sides of people no one wanted to see. The house, he said, had a special history. It was purchased before Claire's marriage, protected through Margaret's separate estate planning, and placed inside a family trust designed for one purpose: to keep Claire safe. Claire remembered shaking her head. Safe from what? Margaret's eyes had filled, though her voice stayed steady. From any day when someone tries to make you feel homeless inside your own life. Claire had pushed the envelope back then, almost offended by the idea that Ethan could ever become that someone. "He loves me," she had said. Margaret smiled sadly. "I hope he always remembers how." Then she pressed the brass key into Claire's hand. "This is not about mistrusting your husband. It is about trusting your worth." Claire wanted to open the envelope right there, but Margaret covered it with her palm. "Not now. Keep it in the kitchen drawer, the one beside the recipe box. Open it only if the home becomes a weapon instead of a shelter." For years, Claire left it untouched. After Margaret's funeral, when the casseroles stopped coming and the house became too quiet, she placed the envelope exactly where her mother had asked. The drawer smelled faintly of cinnamon, old paper, and wood polish. Sometimes, during hard months, Claire would see the corner of it when reaching for a measuring spoon. She could have opened it when Ethan's tone became sharp. She could have opened it when he started calling the house dead money. She could have opened it the first time Vanessa sent him a spreadsheet showing how much the property might sell for. But Claire did not want truth to become punishment. She wanted Ethan to come back on his own. She wanted him to stand in the kitchen one evening, look around, and remember that the roof over them had held him too. That was why, the night before the showing, Claire tried one last time. She cooked the meal he used to love when they were broke and hopeful. Pot roast slow cooked until it fell apart, mashed potatoes with too much butter, green beans with toasted almonds, and warm rolls brushed with honey. She set 2 plates at the dining table. She placed the brass key beside Ethan's napkin, not as a threat, but as an invitation. At 7 the food was ready. At 8 the candles had burned low. At 9:15, Ethan walked in with his phone pressed to his ear, laughing at something Vanessa said on the other end. He stopped when he saw the table. For one quiet second, Claire saw the old Ethan flicker behind his eyes. The man who once kissed flour from her cheek. The man who once said this house made him feel like he had finally been chosen. Then the flicker vanished. He ended the call, loosened his tie, and said, "Tomorrow needs to go smoothly." Claire looked at the untouched chair across from her. "I made dinner." "I see that." His eyes moved to the key. "What is this supposed to mean?" She answered carefully. "It means there are things about this house you have forgotten." Ethan sighed, already tired of feelings before she had even finished having them. "Claire, not tonight. We are too close to fixing everything." "Fixing everything," she repeated. "By selling the place my mother left for us to live in? By selling the only thing that never asked you to prove yourself?" He rubbed his forehead. "Tomorrow sign the papers. Please do not make me fight you in front of people." That was when Claire understood. He was not afraid of losing her. He was afraid of being embarrassed. Now, back in the living room, with Samuel standing beside the coffee table and Vanessa watching like a judge, Claire felt the weight of every year she had stayed quiet. Samuel touched the sealed envelope but did not open it yet. Mrs. Bennet, he asked softly, do I have your permission? Claire looked at Ethan one more time. She searched his face for regret, for memory, for even a small return of the man who had once loved her gently. All she saw was impatience dressed up as authority. She placed the brass key on top of the sales agreement. Yes, she said. Open it. Samuel slid one finger beneath the seal of the envelope, and the sound of paper opening seemed louder than anything else in the room. Ethan folded his arms, trying to look bored, but Claire could see the tension in his jaw. Vanessa stood near the fireplace with her chin lifted, still confident enough to believe paperwork could be negotiated like everything else. The realtor hovered near the entryway, uncertain whether to leave or witness the end of the deal. Claire kept her eyes on the brass key lying on top of the unsigned sales agreement. It looked small there, almost helpless against all those printed pages, but somehow it held the room more firmly than Ethan's pen ever had. Samuel unfolded the first document slowly. For legal clarity, he said, I will summarize in plain language. Margaret Whitmore purchased this property before Mrs. Bennet's marriage, and maintained it as separate family property through documented estate planning. Ethan gave a short, impatient laugh. Her mother may have bought it, but Claire and I are married. We have lived here together for years. I have put money into this place. Samuel looked up. You contributed to household expenses. That does not make you the legal owner. Ethan's face darkened, but Samuel continued before he could interrupt. In the final year of her life, Margaret Whitmore transferred the property into the Whitmore Family Residence Trust. The trust names Claire Bennet as the sole beneficiary and protected resident. The property cannot be sold, transferred, refinanced, or used as collateral without her written consent and trustee approval. Vanessa's red nails stopped tapping. The realtor slowly lowered his tablet. Claire felt the words enter her one by one, not as a shock, but as a confirmation of something her mother had been trying to tell her all along. Protected resident. Sole beneficiary. Not homeless inside her own life. Ethan stared at Samuel as if the attorney had spoken in another language. That cannot be right. Samuel turned the page and placed it on the coffee table where Ethan could see Margaret's signature, the notary stamp, and the trust title printed in clean black letters. It is right. Ethan stepped forward, scanning the page without touching it. His eyes moved faster and faster, searching for a loophole, a mistake, a missing line that could return the power he thought he had. But there was none. Claire watched his confidence drain from his shoulders. Vanessa recovered first. Surely there are marital property considerations, she said. Her voice smooth but thinner now. Samuel gave her a polite glance. Are you Mrs. Bennet's attorney? Vanessa stiffened. No. Then this is not your legal matter. The words were not cruel. That made them land harder. Vanessa looked at Ethan, waiting for him to defend her. But Ethan was still staring at the document. The house is not yours, Samuel said, not loudly, not triumphantly. Mr. Bennet, you do not have authority to sell it. Any agreement presented today is invalid without Mrs. Bennet's consent. Claire heard herself breathe. For months, Ethan had moved through the house like a man with keys to every room and ownership over every memory. He had spoken over her, planned around her, invited strangers in without permission. Now the truth sat between them, crisp and official, and all he could do was blink at it. Ethan turned toward Claire. You knew? His voice was quieter now. Claire swallowed. I knew there was an envelope. I did not know every word inside it. But you knew enough, he said, hurt twisting into accusation because that was easier than shame. You let me stand here and look like a fool. Claire looked at the sales agreement, the yellow tabs, the pen he had pushed toward her hand. No, Ethan. You did that when you brought buyers into my home and told them I was sentimental. A silence followed so deep even the old clock seemed careful with its ticking. The realtor stepped forward, face flushed. Given this information, we will withdraw from today's showing. I apologize, Mrs. Bennet. Truly. The buyers, still waiting near the porch, slipped away with murmured goodbyes. The front door closed softly behind them. Vanessa gathered her folder against her chest. Ethan, we should talk somewhere else, she said. But Ethan did not move. He was still looking at Claire, as if seeing her outline change before him. Not weaker. Not louder. Simply no longer available for erasure. Samuel placed the remaining documents back into the envelope and rested his hand on top of it. Margaret also left a personal letter for you, Mrs. Bennet. Claire's throat tightened. For me? Samuel nodded. She asked that it be read only when the house had to defend you. Claire reached for the envelope with trembling fingers. Ethan watched the movement, and for the first time that day, he did not look angry. He looked afraid. Not afraid of losing property. Afraid of what a dead woman had seen in him before he had seen it in himself. Claire held the letter close but did not open it yet. She looked around the room. The fireplace, the clock, the dining table, the doorway to the kitchen where last night's uneaten meal still haunted the air. Then she looked at Ethan. You wanted to sell a house, she said softly. My mother left me a home. The front door closed behind the buyers with a soft click, and the house seemed to exhale. For the first time all afternoon, no strangers were measuring the rooms with their eyes. No one was whispering about curb appeal or market timing. The living room returned to itself. The old clock ticking on the mantel, the rain tapping against the windows, the faint smell of last night's pot roast still drifting from the kitchen like a memory Ethan had refused to sit with. Vanessa stood near the fireplace, her folder hugged tight against her chest, her confidence fading now that the numbers had stopped working in her favor. She looked at Ethan, waiting for him to say something to rescue the plan, to prove he was still the man she had been encouraging him to become. But Ethan said nothing. His eyes stayed on the envelope in Claire's hands. Vanessa's voice sharpened just a little. Ethan, this is complicated, but it does not have to be the end of everything. There are other ways to leverage future opportunities. Samuel Price turned his head slowly. Miss Cole, there is no future opportunity involving this property without Mrs. Bennet's consent. Vanessa's mouth tightened. Of course. I meant generally. Claire watched her with a strange calm. For months, Vanessa had been a shadow in the marriage, not loud enough to accuse, not close enough to confront, but always present in Ethan's language. Market window. Dead money. Bigger future. Now, without the house, Vanessa looked smaller than Claire expected. Not powerful. Just practical in the coldest way. Ethan finally looked at her. You should go, he said. Vanessa blinked. Ethan. Please. Go. The word was quiet, but it was final enough. Vanessa gathered herself, smoothing the front of her blazer as if dignity were something that could be pressed back into place. She walked toward the door without looking at Claire. When she passed the coffee table, her eyes flicked once to the brass key, then away. A moment later she was gone, and with her went the last performance Ethan had been hiding behind. The room felt too large around him. Samuel picked up the invalid sales agreement and stacked it neatly, as if putting away the evidence of a storm. I will remain available, Mrs. Bennet, he said gently. There are legal steps we can take if you want formal boundaries regarding access, financial separation, or protection of the trust property. Claire nodded, but her mind was not ready for steps. It was still standing in the space between betrayal and breath. Thank you, Samuel. He paused, softened. Your mother wanted you protected, not hardened. Remember that when you decide what comes next. Then he left too, closing the door with the care of a man who understood that some rooms needed silence before healing could even be named. Claire and Ethan were alone. For a long moment neither moved. Ethan looked around the living room as if someone had changed it while he was not watching. The fireplace where he used to warm his hands after fixing the gutters. The couch where he and Claire had eaten takeout the night his first commission check came in. The little scratch on the floor from the rocking chair Margaret refused to throw away. None of it had changed. He had. Claire held her mother's unopened letter against her chest. Ethan's voice came out low. I thought I was doing this for us. Claire did not answer right away. She walked to the dining table and picked up the brass key from the sales agreement. The metal felt warmer now, free of those papers. Were you? She asked. Ethan swallowed. I wanted us to have more. No, Claire said softly. You wanted people to think you were more. The words struck him because they were not shouted. They were simply true. He looked toward the kitchen, where 2 plates from last night still sat rinsed but not put away, as if even the sink had been waiting for an apology. I got tired of feeling small, he admitted. Claire's eyes filled, but her voice stayed steady. So you made me smaller. Ethan closed his eyes. For a second she saw the man beneath the pride. Exhausted, ashamed. frightened by the life he had built in his head and the woman he had nearly sacrificed to reach it. But seeing his pain did not erase hers. That was the lesson Margaret had tried to leave behind. Compassion was not the same as surrender. Claire walked to the front door and opened it. Rain whispered across the porch. Ethan looked at her, stunned. "Claire, I need you to leave tonight," she said. "Not forever. Not as punishment. But because this house needs to feel safe again. And I need to hear my own thoughts without your ambition speaking over them." He stared at the doorway, then at her. "Where am I supposed to go?" For the first time all day, Claire almost smiled, but it was a sad one. "You have spent months planning a future without this home. Start there." Ethan flinched. Then slowly, he picked up his coat from the chair. At the threshold, he turned back, searching for a softer ending than the one he had earned. Claire stood with the brass key in one hand and her mother's letter in the other. She looked heartbroken but not broken. Ethan stepped into the rain and Claire closed the door. Only then did she sit at the kitchen table, open Margaret's letter, and finally let her mother speak. Claire unfolded her mother's letter at the kitchen table with both hands, careful not to tear the paper that had waited years to be read. The rain moved softly against the windows, and the house felt different without Ethan inside it. Not empty. Listening. Margaret's handwriting filled the page in blue ink, steady in some places, weaker in others. "My dearest Claire, if you are reading this, then the home I loved has had to protect you in a way I prayed it never would. I am sorry for that. But I am not sorry for giving you walls no one could take by speaking louder than you." Claire pressed her fingers to her mouth, and the first tear fell before she reached the second line. Her mother had always known how to love gently and prepare fiercely. The letter did not tell Claire to hate Ethan. It did not tell her to punish him, humiliate him, or close her heart forever. Instead, Margaret wrote about responsibility. "A house is made of wood and brick, sweetheart, but a home is made by the people who choose care when pride would be easier. Never confuse a man wanting shelter with a man willing to build safety. If Ethan remembers that, let his actions prove it. If he does not, do not shrink yourself to make room for his forgetting." Claire read those words 3 times. Then she looked around the kitchen. The room still held signs of the night before. The empty candle holders, the folded napkin at Ethan's place, the brass key beside the salt shaker. She had spent so long hoping love would return if she kept the table set. Now she understood love also needed boundaries, or it became a room where only one person was allowed to breathe. Across town, Ethan sat alone in a business hotel off the interstate, his damp coat hanging over a chair, his phone face down on the bed. Vanessa had called twice. He had not answered. Without her voice filling the silence, the future he had chased sounded strangely hollow. Luxury condo. New clients. Better address. He had said those words so many times they should have felt solid. Instead, they slipped through him like smoke. On the small hotel desk lay a notepad with the logo of a conference center. He could not afford to impress. He tried to write numbers, options, next steps, but every line turned into the same memory. Claire standing in the doorway with the key in her hand, saying the house needed to feel safe again. Safe. He had never thought of himself as someone unsafe. He had never raised a hand. He had never thrown a chair. He had told himself that meant he was a good husband, or at least not a bad one. But now he saw the quieter ways a man could make a home unsafe. He could dismiss a wife's memories until she stopped sharing them. He could invite strangers into her grief and call it business. He could make her defend what should have been honored. Ethan leaned back and covered his face with both hands. Shame did not arrive as a lightning strike. It arrived as a long hallway, and every door opened into something he had done. The next morning, Claire opened Bennett Bakes at 5:30, just as she always did. The bell above the door chimed. The ovens warmed. The first batch of blueberry muffins rose under golden light. Customers noticed her tired eyes, but no one pried. Mrs. Alvarez from the post office squeezed her hand and said, "The coffee tastes strong today." Claire smiled because she knew what that meant. "I made it that way on purpose." By noon, she had called Samuel Price and asked what legal boundaries looked like. Not revenge. Boundaries. By 3, she had paid the utility bill from the bakery account and written a list on the back of a receipt. Change alarm code, review trust documents, sleep through one full night, breathe. That evening when she came home, Ethan's truck was parked at the curb. He stood beside it in yesterday's suit. No umbrella, no folder, no Vanessa. Just a man who looked like he had finally run out of performances. Claire stopped on the porch. Ethan did not step closer. "I am not here to come in," he said. "I know I do not get to ask for that." Claire waited. He swallowed hard. "I booked an appointment with a financial counselor and a therapist. I called Samuel to ask what I need to do to make sure none of my debts touch the trust." Claire's expression shifted, but only slightly. "That is a start," she said. Ethan nodded, accepting that a start was not forgiveness. Rain gathered on his shoulders. "I thought the key meant control," he said. "Your mother knew it meant responsibility." Claire looked down at the brass key in her hand, then back at the closed door behind her. For the first time, she did not feel the need to explain the difference. 6 months passed, and the house learned a new kind of quiet. Not the aching quiet after a door slammed shut, and not the heavy quiet of two people sharing rooms while saying nothing true. This quiet had space in it. Claire filled that space slowly, carefully, one ordinary choice at a time. She changed the alarm code. She met with Samuel Price twice and signed documents that made the boundaries clear. She hired a local handyman to fix the loose porch step Ethan had promised to repair for 3 years. She painted the kitchen a soft cream color because her mother had always wanted it brighter. At Bennett Bakes, business grew after the fall catering season began, and Claire started closing the shop 1 hour earlier on Fridays, not because she was lazy, but because she was learning that survival was not the same as living. Every Friday evening, she brought home unsold rolls, made tea, and read one recipe card from Margaret's box like it was scripture. Some nights she cried. Some nights she laughed. Some nights she simply sat with the brass key on the table and let herself feel safe without apologizing for it. Ethan did not disappear, but he no longer pushed. That was the first proof that something in him had changed. He sent short messages only when necessary. Mortgage records updated. Debt consolidation meeting completed. Therapy appointment attended. Financial counselor recommended separate repayment plan. No speeches. No dramatic promises. Just facts, each one a small brick placed where trust had collapsed. Claire did not answer every message. When she did, she kept her replies simple. "Thank you for letting me know. Keep going." At first, that distance felt cruel to Ethan. Then, in therapy, he learned that distance could also be respect. He rented a small one-bedroom apartment above a hardware store. The kind of place with thin walls, a humming refrigerator, and a view of the parking lot. It was not the future he had bragged about. It was not impressive. That was the point. Without a house to claim, without Vanessa praising his ambition, without Claire absorbing the consequences of his fear, Ethan had to meet himself plainly. Some evenings after work, he drove past the old neighborhood but did not stop. He would slow at the corner and see the porch light glowing warm through the rain. For months, he had thought that light belonged to him. Now he understood it had been offered to him, again and again, by a woman he had mistaken for an obstacle when she had been the only shelter he truly had. Vanessa moved on quickly. Claire heard through town gossip that the condo project found another investor, then stalled when permits delayed construction. The news did not satisfy her. That surprised her. She had imagined justice would taste sharp and sweet, but mostly it tasted like freedom from caring whether people who used her pain were punished. Her life was no longer arranged around proving them wrong. It was arranged around becoming whole. In the 3rd month, Ethan asked if they could meet in a public place. Claire chose a booth at a quiet diner 10 minutes from the bakery. He arrived early, wearing a plain gray sweater instead of a suit. There was no folder, no sales pitch, no performance. He looked nervous in a human way. For the first few minutes they talked about practical things, taxes, repairs, documents. Then Ethan placed a small paper on the table. It was a receipt from his first therapy session, folded neatly. "I kept this because I wanted to remember the day I stopped pretending pride was the same thing as strength," he said. Claire looked at the receipt, then at him. "I am glad you went. That was all." He nodded as if he understood that all was already more than he deserved. By the 5th month, he had paid down a portion of his personal debt. By the 6th, he wrote Claire a letter instead of asking for another meeting. It was not polished. There were crossed-out lines, uneven sentences, and one coffee stain near the bottom. He did not ask to come home. He listed what he had done, what he still owed, and what he finally understood. I treated the house like proof that I mattered, he wrote. But the house was never supposed to prove me. It was supposed to teach me how to care for what mattered. Claire read the letter at the kitchen table, beneath the same clock that had watched everything fall apart. The brass key lay beside her tea. For the first time in months, she imagined opening the front door and not feeling smaller for it. Outside, October rain returned to the windows, soft and familiar. The house did not tell her what to do. It simply held her steady while she decided what kind of love, if any, could be allowed back inside. On the first Saturday of October, exactly 1 year after Ethan tried to sell the house, Claire opened the front door before he could knock. Rain silvered the porch steps the same way it had that day, but everything else was different. Ethan stood beneath the porch light in a dark wool coat, holding no folder, no contract, no key he believed gave him power. In his hands was a small paper bag from Bennett Bakes, folded carefully at the top. Claire recognized the smell before he spoke. Blueberry muffins. He had bought them that morning, not from her, but from the new cashier she had hired, standing in line like any other customer. I thought about bringing flowers, he said. Then looked down at the bag with a nervous half-smile. But your mother would probably say food is more honest. Claire felt the ache of almost laughing, and that ache surprised her with its gentleness. She stepped onto the porch but did not invite him in yet. Ethan accepted that. He had learned the difference between a door and a right. For a moment they listened to the rain touch the gutters, the rose bushes, the repaired porch step beneath his shoes. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the old brass key. Claire's breath caught. She had given it to him only once years ago when marriage still felt simple. Somehow through all the chaos he had kept it. I found this in my desk drawer when I moved apartments, he said. I could have mailed it back, but that felt too easy. He placed it in her open palm without closing her fingers around it. I used to think a key meant ownership. Then I thought it meant access. Now I know your mother was right. It means responsibility. Claire looked at the key, its worn edges catching the porch light. What responsibility means to you now? She asked. Ethan answered slowly, as if each word had been earned the hard way. It means I do not enter where I have not rebuilt trust. It means I do not call your memories clutter because I am ashamed of my own failures. It means I pay my debts without using your safety as collateral. It means I keep choosing care after the apology is over. Claire closed her fingers around the key. Behind her the house glowed warm. The kitchen had cream walls now. The clock still ticked on the mantel. Margaret's recipe box sat where it always had, beside a framed copy of the trust letter, not as a warning but as a witness. Claire had spent a year learning that forgiveness was not a door swinging wide because someone looked sorry in the rain. Forgiveness, if it came at all, had to arrive with boundaries, patience, and proof. Ethan seemed to know that too. I am not asking to move back in, he said. Not tonight. Not soon. I am asking if I can keep showing up the right way. Claire studied him. The old Ethan would have begged, explained, defended. This Ethan stood still and let her silence matter. That did not fix everything. But it meant something. She opened the door behind her, just wide enough for the warm air to reach the porch. There is coffee, she said. 1 cup. Ethan's eyes filled before he could hide it. 1 cup is enough. Inside, he stopped at the threshold and waited until Claire nodded. Only then did he step in. He looked around the living room without claiming any of it. The fireplace. The repaired floor scratch. The mantel clock. The house did not shrink from him, but it did not embrace him blindly either. It simply stood steady and watchful, the way Claire had learned to stand. They sat at the kitchen table with coffee and muffins between them. No dramatic music. No instant miracle. Just 2 people in a house that had survived a storm, deciding whether love could be rebuilt one honest act at a time. Ethan told her he had continued therapy. Claire told him Bennett Bakes was expanding catering for the holidays. He listened without turning her success into his redemption. She noticed. After a while he looked at the recipe box and smiled sadly. Your mother protected you better than I loved you. Claire touched the brass key beside her cup. She protected me so I could learn to protect myself. Ethan nodded, and for once, he did not add anything. Months later there would be more counseling sessions, more difficult conversations, More days when trust felt near and then far again. But that night, when Ethan left after 1 cup of coffee, he did not take the key. He left it on the table exactly where it belonged. Claire stood by the window and watched him walk through the rain toward his car. Not defeated, not forgiven completely, but changed enough to keep walking. The house behind her was quiet, warm, and hers. And for the first time, Claire understood the full truth her mother had left behind. A home was never about who could claim it. A home was about who was willing to honor it, protect it, and become worthy of being welcomed inside.